So slavery ended in the United States around 1865, right? 1864, 1865. One could argue that they just got fed up. It's been almost 100 years and they have not seen what they were promised.
In the 60s.
In the 60s. But gradually in the 1940s, 1950s, I think that's when the frustration started to build.
Yeah.
Especially after World War I and World War II. Because imagine, in World War I and World War II, Black Americans went to war as Americans, supporting the Allies, supporting the American team. They died for Americans, for the United States, right? They died for the cause of freedom, not once, but twice. Korean War came again in the early 1950s. They continued to die for this country. And if you go all the way back, the Revolutionary War, they died for American independence. The Civil War, they died to keep the framework, the United States Constitution true and living.
Yeah.
They've died repeatedly to maintain a land that does not welcome them. So I get the impression that after World War I and World War II, they came back with a certain level of frustration. And I think the frustration was generally felt by the entire Black community, that where segregation exists, discrimination exists, but you have no problem sending us to die for these institutions that don't take care of us and that don't respect our place. So I think I think the soil was fertile, the social, the emotional, the intellectual soil, the spirit of America. I think it was fertile for the emergence of a figure like James Baldwin and various figures of that sort, who came with the consciousness that something needs to change.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm always very uneducated on Black history, right? So therefore my questions may be a bit naive. Right?
Of course, we're here to learn.
Yeah. So like, how would you say he stands in relation to ideas of Martin Luther King, which is the person that I know from Black history?
Yeah.
And that's maybe like one of the limits that I have. And maybe I say the question is so simple because I just take the first person that comes into my mind with regard to that.
Understand.
And I remember him wanting change, but somehow in a very intellectual way, if I could express it that way.
So the civil rights movement, it required so each human being has a particular talent, right? Some of us are good speakers, some of us are good athletes, some of us are good preachers, you name it, writers and so on. Human beings have talents. At that time period, we needed whatever your talent was, use it, contribute to the cause. So how I would say James Baldwin relates to Martin Luther King is that they both had the same mission, which is to bring civil rights, justice, and equality to the African American community. But they both had two different talents. They had different competencies. So the onus is on the individual to know who you are and what you can do, and to understand that there is a cause and that there is a spirit that we need to contribute to. And I think that's what they did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like also sometimes the Black movement can be divided in itself, right?
Of course.
So maybe it's unfair if I say, okay, Alec Baldwin is more
Alex. I mean, it's not Alex, sorry, James.
James. I don't...
It's okay, it's okay.
So yeah, but what I find, is it maybe right if I group him more on the side of Martin Luther King, because he writes more about the experience and about the relationship that we have, that is established to white people, that comes out to white people. How do we achieve a meaningful relationship that maybe does not include too much pride, like a counter reaction to the oppression, you know?
Yeah.
So that makes everything that happened in the past maybe transparent and explains who we are, and then tries to accomplish a meaningful relationship for the future.
Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. what we see in James Baldwin's writings is that James Baldwin, he makes an attempt in his essays and in his books, the fact that the racial problem does exist, the struggle does exist, but there's a hint of optimism that we can and we do and we should be one American people. And Martin Luther King also is more on that side. Whereas a contrast to all of this would be someone like Malcolm X.
Yeah.
Whereas Malcolm X, he didn't have this sense of optimism that we can and should unite. You know, for him, it was a problem that could not be resolved and probably should not be resolved and basically impossible. So it's best to just separate ourselves completely from the white institutions, the white experience, and to be militant about it and to be separate from it.
Yeah, maybe last question before we come to the book, Another Country, that we want to talk about. So did James Baldwin have any stance on these ideas of Malcolm X? Did he say any explicit about the ideas of Malcolm X, or maybe indirectly?
From my reading and from my research, I've not come across any direct references that that James Baldwin had towards or against Malcolm X. But I am under the impression that they come from two very different schools of thought. You know, Malcolm X, although, you know, one could argue that he was a bit of an intellectual as well, but he came, or his approach to the American problem.
They're both from Harlem, right? Am I right? Or?
Yeah, no, I think Malcolm X is, Malcolm X, he did most of his work towards the end, if I'm not wrong, in Harlem, but he's not originally from Harlem. He's from the Midwest. Malcolm X was a Muslim. He converted to Islam, right? So there's a large amount of religious references, and he approached the American racial problem with a religious perspective, with religion, right? With a religion that was the anti-Christian, one could argue, because Christianity in the United States, as an institution, one could argue, helped to create and to maintain the power structures because of the influence that they had on the laws, on the institutions, and given the fact that it was the religion of the oppressors, and then the oppressors then brought it to the oppressed, and then the oppressed adopted the religion of the oppressors. And the Nation of Islam, which Malcolm X was a part of, it was basically an anti-Christian at the time. And James Baldwin himself also was not a fan of the Christian church. And he expresses this in his first book, Go Tell It on the Mountain, that's published in the late 1940s, where he presented all his criticisms.
Book that made him famous, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Where he presented his criticisms of the Black experience in the Christian church, and how the Christian church does also serve to oppress Black people in the United States. Because, yeah.
Could you, I mean, it's very interesting, but I feel like we don't come to the book, because now the question comes immediately to my mind when he talks about the Black oppressed in the church. How could that be relevant for white people reading such a book? Because it's an open question. Don't understand me, right?
Of course.
I just immediately wonder about that, because it seems when I watch a movie, right? Sometimes movies or books are structured for a certain target group, a target audience.
Of course.
Right? But this target audience, if I understand you correctly, is not only the Black person.
No, not only. And that's why a lot of Black intellectuals in the 1960s and 70s, they were not big fans of James Baldwin, because some argued that James Baldwin more or less was the darling of the white intellect, the white liberals. Some argued that he was the darling of the white liberals, because many of his books, they were also written for white people. and 2 white people.
Yeah. And that's not a mistake, as he's more like on the side of, as I understand, Martin Luther and less on the side of Malcolm X,
Correct,
right?
correct. I think he only agrees on Malcolm X with the issue of the Christian religion and how the Christian religion basically, in some ways, one could argue it made black people, one could say, it made black people comfortable and complacent with not striving for more in America.
Okay, however, we want to switch gears a little bit, change gears, and come to the book Another Country, which I perceive, okay, I didn't read it. I just read like Wikipedia, watched some YouTube videos and so on. But I perceive that as super controversial, more at its time in the 50s, because it discusses the relationship of different, how to say, sexual identities, people with different sexual identities, and on top of that, different races.
Yeah.
Am I saying it wrong when I say on top of it, different races?
No, I would say you can say whatever you want. I think it's fine. I think it's fine.
It's fine, yeah.
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want, like, I mean, I'm interested in myself. If I say something in an inconvenient way, right, or in a way that would be not, as we say nowadays, politically correct, right? I can still say it, but then somebody gives me the chance to see why it's maybe not the best way to say it, right? But not like coming with a hammer and like.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I understand where you're coming from with that, because, you know, as I'm speaking as well, I'm also asking myself, am I making the correct references? Am I also making sure that I say things in the correct way? We don't want to offend anyone naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, what I really wonder about the book Another Country, which has these controversial topics, like, so you read many essays of James Baldwin?
I wouldn't say many, but I've read a few. Yeah.
So did you read any other books, or was it like the only book that you read?
So I've read
Go Tell It on the Mountain, or To the Mountain?
No, yes, that one. And Giovanni's Room. I've also read If Beale Street Could Talk. And I've read Tell Me How Long the Train Has Been Gone.
So you read many of them?
Quite a few.
I would say many. It
Quite
sounds
a few.
many, right? I would say you are like, you're very familiar with James Baldwin. That's what I can hear.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, why is it like I asked you for your favorite book, and you said that would be Another Country. So why is it so relevant to you?
Why is it so relevant to me? Loaded question. So I'm going to leave the intellectual realm for a bit, and I'm going to tell you, just based on an emotional reason.
Yeah.
James Baldwin is one of those writers that he depresses you.
Yeah.
He depresses you.
By the way, I'm sorry to interrupt. I have no problem if somebody depresses me by his writing. It makes me happy.
Yeah.
A depressive writer makes me happy. So
he makes you, he takes your understanding of things. He takes your little boxes in your mind that are perfectly linear and perfect and just make sense. And then he takes your idea and your worldview and your understanding of things such as race or sexuality, and he takes them into a grinder and he grinds them and he scatters them. And then you have to ask yourself after, I don't really know anything, do I? And I think that's why
so he's technically a philosopher.
Technically, because some argue that he wasn't the best novelist, people say. He was a better essay writer. Because when you're reading a novel of his, it reads like an essay. It reads more like an essay than a novel.
Yeah.
So because of that, it does have that deep philosophical. He takes you and he grinds your mind, and he makes you feel horrible.
Yeah, it seems the book, like when I look at the content, it's this jazz drummer, if I understand, or is it a drummer like Rufus Scott?
Rufus Scott was a jazz artist.
A jazz artist, and he's the drummer, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
So I read like this the summary of the plot, but there is not much plot.
No,
There's people
no,
who have relationships to each other, and then
correct.
spoiler warning. But anyway,
Yeah,
I'm not afraid of spoilers. But
me either.
he
Yeah,
he kills himself.
he
Right?
does.
He commits
He
suicide.
commits suicide. And I think it's on the back of the book as well.
It's on the back of the
Yeah,
book as well. Yeah. So that's the first fifth of the book, right?
correct.
And then he kills himself, and then it's basically people just asking themselves, why did he kill himself? Am I right?
Yeah, why did he kill himself? And why should I not also kill myself?
Yeah.
Why did he kill himself? And then it's like they come to the point where they're understanding, okay, that's why he killed himself. And perhaps I'm also facing very similar issues to him. Why am I not killing myself? So that's why I think it's largely philosophical, because we face as human beings all of this oppression and all of these questions. And what keeps some of us around, and why do some of us just want to jump off the bridge?
Yeah, that's a very tough question, and it just rings a bell inside of me.
Yeah.
Because I also know some people who have always these commands that tell them to kill themselves. It seems somehow, where does that come from?
For this, we need to bring a psychologist. We need to bring a psychologist. We need to bring a pastor. We need to bring a whole team to discuss this.
But that's what
Because
the
I
book is
honestly don't.
about,
But
right?
that's what the book is
Yeah.
about. I honestly, and it's one of those books that I read it, probably around 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm still not sure why he killed himself. Because I don't know what brought him to that point. Because, and then again, there was also an economic question that comes into this. And as a person who studied economics, I can't help but see the economic questions in things. He's broke.
He was broke, yeah.
His heart was broken.
Yeah.
He's financially broke. He's just a broken human being. You understand? He just was at the bottom of the bottom
Yeah.
of the American society.
I also know, like, I read one citation from him, and it said, like, nobody knows how expensive it is to be poor.
No one knows.
If you're not poor,
exactly.
yeah.
And it's not just the literal, the material cost of poverty, but there's also an emotional cost
Yeah.
that comes with it.
Yeah. Also, when he exiled first to France,
Yeah.
he lived basically as a homeless person.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
I remember that part well.
But I'm sorry, we digressed a bit. So
Yes.
I asked about the personal significance
Oh,
of the
that's
book
true.
for you, right? Why is it that book? So can you tell me a little bit more, if you want to, of
Yeah,
course?
of course. I'm really, like I was telling you, I consume art not with my brain alone, but I consume art with my heart. Sometimes it's very difficult to articulate why things feel the way they feel or how they feel. Sometimes it's very difficult to articulate it. But I just felt it really profoundly. Not necessarily intellectually, but in my
How
heart.
old have you been when you read the book?
I was in my mid-20s probably.
Mid-20s.
I was in my mid-20s.
So you finished your bachelor back then?
Yeah, I was already
or-
done with my master's at the time.
You were in Jamaica at that
In
time?
Portugal.
Or? In Portugal.
Portugal.
Oh, so
I
you
think-
also lived in Europe.
Yes, I lived in Europe for a while. So yeah, I spent most of my 20s in Europe, I would say. I think the book impacted me because it was the first time in my life I read a book that had so many issues in
Yeah.
it. And I think I'm the kind of person that I like a lot of stimulation. I like to feel very stimulated. I like my mind to be very stimulated. And the book had so many different things. It had issues of poverty versus wealth, issues of sexuality, issues of nationality, issues of ethnicity, issues of race, of culture, of gender. It had so many things in it.
Yeah.
I think that's why I liked it. I
Yeah.
think that's why it had such a big impact on me. Because it just, up until that point of my life, I don't think I ever read a book that was so stimulating and that had so many references to so many different issues. I think that's what kept me interested in the book until now.
Yeah. So okay, again, I didn't read the book, right? But what I find interesting, it discusses all of these topics, race, sexual identity,
Yeah.
right? Racism, and poverty, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
It had a good
National
bit.
identity.
Yes, it
right?
did.
And so we have to see that the identity that we want to form for ourselves, that's how I perceive it.
Yeah.
That comes from all of these different aspects. And all of these aspects have a broken side. And he, so I mean, I'm like, I probably don't have so many things to complain about in my life, but I think James Baldwin also said something like, you think that your life is hard, but then you start reading.
Yeah. Another thought came to my mind while you were speaking about why I think I really like this book. Because it's goddamn human. As a human being, whether you pay attention to something or not, it's affecting you. All of these things, every single human being on this earth, we are being affected by our various identities, right? Our economic circumstances, being born, whether you're born in Zambia, Zimbabwe, or you're born in Jamaica, or the UK, or Germany. There are so many factors affecting your life. There's so many factors that are preventing you from certain opportunities. There's so many factors that give you opportunities that don't give other people opportunities. Whether you want to pay attention to them or not, or whether you are aware of them or not, so many, you're not just what you pay attention to. There's an entire world that you are impacting and that is also impacting you. And I think that's why that novel is so precious. It's so precious because he basically opens the door and opens the reality that everything affects you. Everything in your every aspect of your identity. You cannot be black and escape that you're black. You cannot be white and escape that you're white, even if you're race blind. You cannot be straight or gay and it not affect you. You cannot be born a certain place and it not affect you. That's what I think the brilliance of this novel is. The brilliance of the novel is that he shows you that no matter who you are, no matter if you're rich and your life seems perfect, no matter if you're poor and your life seems horrible, no matter who you are or where you're from or whatever circumstances that you're dealing with, even if the only thing you care about is, I just want to get money and be rich and successful, right? Or I just want to party and have a good time.
Yeah.
No matter who you are and who you choose to be and what you choose to do, there are so many more things affecting your life than you are aware of.
Yes, but that sounds like very negative.
Why is it negative?
Because you have established your identity,
Yeah.
right? I'm just provoking you, but I want to know
course.
what's the positive outcome, right? You have established your identity and then somebody comes and just smashes it.
Correct. I wouldn't say someone come and smashes someone come and to smash your identity. That's not that's not how I see it. How I see it is, it's very difficult to be a human being who is fully empathetic and also a human being who is fully realized and fully conscious until you're conscious of as many aspects of yourself as possible.
And how that also relates to others.
And how that relates to others, which is where the empathetic part comes in. And then you also then begin to see that another human being who is your friend or whoever you're dating, that person or your family member, no matter who the other human being is, there's so much about, there are many factors within that person that affects your relationship with them affects their relationship with themselves, and that limits or brings them up.
Does he
Yeah.
give an answer, like how to solve that problem, or does he just like leave you and say, this is like, look at yourself in that way. That's what you have to deal with. This is the real problem.
I think once you're able to look at yourself and all the parts that come with you, I could argue, I'm not sure. I could possibly say that's the more difficult part. And the easy part after that is just to live.
Oh, yeah. So like seeing the problem must be part of the solution.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would
Because
say...
sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
Because it then informs your decision making. It informs your capacity for compassion and empathy. It informs your prejudices, or it helps to reduce them. It allows you to live better, to have a better quality of life.
Yeah.
You could possibly say that.
Yeah, so we haven't yet talked too much about the book. This was basically just the introduction, but I think we stop here at this time, and then we go on in the next session and talk more about the book in particular.
Of course.
And discuss some themes. I think this was very interesting to hear all of these backgrounds. I feel, not you, but I feel we still just stayed on the surface.
Yeah,
right? There's
very
so
much on
many
the
questions
surface.
that
Very
come to my
much.
mind.
Very much.
So if you have any questions that I maybe should have asked, right, then maybe you leave that in the comments. I'm not sure yet where I post that, right?
Yeah.
Probably on YouTube and at some other channels. But I would be happy if you let us know what you think and what you think, which questions we should have asked. So far, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It was really intense.
Yeah.
Like intense to get to know like these historical backgrounds of this person. And I can say that after our discussion, we haven't discussed yet all of it. I will definitely read that book to see what it is all about. So thank you very much and goodbye.